Good afternoon, everyone. Granted that I'm coming through nice and clear. I didn't do an intro this time. I do these article reads kind of cold, as it were. Apologies for the overriding background music in the previous broadcast regarding the D&D scandal. I listened back to it after the fact, and boy, that was almost, it kind of ruined the whole stream. I keep it up for history's sake, or record's sake, but I was... Unbeknownst to me, that background music was pretty bad. Hopefully this isn't too overpowering. Let me know if it is in the chat, and I will either turn it off or turn it down. But yes, we have an update. Now, for those of you that did not get through the previous broadcast I did on this, which I understand, I submitted my thoughts to their survey at D&D, Hasbro, Wizards of the Coast, whoever we're talking about, D&D for short, and gave my thoughts on their whole plan and scheme to try to undercut third-party creators, their fan base, the kind of status quo that's been nice and friendly and open to people using their creative genius to try to add to their own product over the last couple of decades. If you don't know the totality of this scandal, so to speak, at this point, short version is there was a policy, in fact, a sort of legal Creative Commons license provided to everybody to create derivative works based on Dungeons and Dragons, and then effectively use their systems, use their trademarks and so on to create their own content that could be used in conjunction with the Dungeons and Dragons rules. And this open license has been around since 2000. Well, then D&D, Hasbro, Wizards of the Coast decided all of a sudden to sort of stealth try to release a updated open gaming license that would effectively negate nearly everything that had gone in the past, and then try to monetize and or take any creative content that was created thereafter for themselves. And they have been scrambling to try to redress this because they were caught, not literally, but metaphorically, with their pants down. Their response thus far has shown that they had no plans, no intention of seeking any feedback from the community, from the people who've been creating content for years. And they've been at the last minute, at the 11th hour, trying to cover their PR rears by, very weakly trying to make up for lost time, which they've done badly at. Holy cats, Derek LaRue, thank you so much. As always, I don't know what to say. That is ridiculously generous of you. I appreciate that very much. Thank you. Your generosity, I do my best when things are particularly generous by people, I try to do something, pay it forward. I generally donate a good chunk of some of my YouTube earnings to Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. I've had family members, friends, and relations who have gone through trials by fire in the realm of leukemia, lymphoma. So, in this case, I cannot help but pay it forward. So thank you so much, Derek. I appreciate that. Let's see, where was my brain at? I also, by the way, I am currently imbibing a pepper jack. So if I stumble through this a little bit, I hope you'll forgive me. Anyway, so the D&D released a survey for everyone to give their feedback about, 2 weeks ago now? And I was one of those individuals, anonymously, to give my thoughts on the whole thing. And now the results are in. Apparently the results are in, and I want to thank Shady Grin, hat tip to Shady Grin, for alerting me to this update, which was only posted about an hour ago. And so let's go through it. Let's find out what the latest and greatest is as D&D attempts to save face after completely nuking their own trustworthiness amongst their fans and their customers. So this is OGL 1.0A and Creative Commons by Kyle Brink. When you give us playtest feedback, we take it seriously. Well, when you solicit it before releasing a draft revision to your OGL, we might take you more seriously. Already more than 15,000 of you have filled out the survey. Here's what you said. 88% do not want to publish tabletop RPG content under OGL 1.2. 1.2, by the way, is the revised OGL that they were attempting to release before it got leaked. 90% would have to change some aspect of their business to accommodate OGL 1.2. Yes, the Open Gaming License allowed people to use Dungeons & Dragons system to create their own games that they could then sell. Entire companies, entire game lines have been built around the original Open Gaming License. And that was threatened to be rug pulled with 1.2 and or profit sharing and or ownership, etc. It just didn't look good. Next, 89% are dissatisfied with deauthorizing OGL 1.0a. Yeah, part of 1.2 would have been to effectively veto any further use of anything created under the previous Open Gaming License. So if you had published something under the Open Gaming License 1.0a the day before the next OGL went into effect, that property, that work would be safe. Anything published under that same license afterwards would effectively fall under the umbrella of control in some way, shape, or form of the company after that. 86% are dissatisfied with the draft virtual tabletop policy. I don't know much about virtual tabletops in practice, and I didn't really go over it much in my previous stream, so I'll take the fans' word for it. 62% are satisfied with including systems reference document content in Creative Commons, and the majority of those who were dissatisfied asked for more SRD content in Creative Commons. So that basically means allowing more systems information into a common pool of use by the public, effectively. Except, and you have to kind of go back about a week or two to a video that I saw from Legal Eagle, who went over the actual legal precedent regarding trying to trademark systems, the systems of things, not just games, but in general. You can't copyright/trademark systems. Like if I roll a D20 in order to conduct a game session, Dungeons & Dragons cannot own the rolling of a D20 for the sake of deciding an action, right? And that extends to just about anything else mechanically in a system of dice, etc. It's only really in the very specific trademark, logos, characters, settings that you kind of get into the territory where, yeah, if you don't have D&D's permission, you can't use that stuff, or you can't monetize it as effectively. These live survey results are clear. You want OGL 1.0a. You want irrevocability. You like Creative Commons. Yeah, I don't know if you got the hint. Over the previous 20 years of implementation and use of the OGL 1.0a, but now I guess you have the evidence that was already right in front of you. The feedback is in such high volume and its direction is so plain that we're acting now. Gosh, just imagine if you had done this before even releasing a draft of 1.2. Imagine if you had said, hey guys, we're getting ready to do some revisions. Time has passed. We're thinking about doing some stuff. What are your thoughts on 1.0a? What if we did this? What would you think about this? Imagine if you'd done that ahead of time, gotten people's feedback. But now, even after all of this band-aiding over an open gunshot wound, you might not make it. Let's see. Number one, we are leaving OGL 1.a in place as is, untouched. Okay. Two, we are also making the entire SRD 5.1 available under a Creative Commons license. And three, you choose which you prefer to use. Now, some of this is in response to what a lot of the other game publishers decided to do in effectively retaliation of what D&D and Wizards of the Coast was preparing to unleash upon content creators, customers, and so on. a whole bunch. I can't name them all. There's like 17 or 20 of them now or something. But like Paizo, I think Green Ronin, Kobold, a whole bunch of other publishers are getting together to create their own in perpetuity, cannot be infringed upon, etc. open gaming license of a system that anybody can use at any time for whatever they want, in perpetuity. And now D&D is trying to play catch up to what the rest of the publishing gaming community is trying to do in order to subvert both what D&D is doing now and to undercut any attempts in the future that D&D might make to try to rein in, monetize, or restrict the open gaming license. So again, while this is all good to hear, it would have been better to hear before they were forced to make these decisions. I don't know that it's going to save them. This Creative Commons license makes the content freely available for any use. We don't control that license and cannot alter or revoke it. It's open and irrevocable in a way that doesn't require you to take our word for it. And its openness means there's no need for a virtual tabletop policy. Placing the SRD under Creative Commons license is a one-way door. There's no going back. Our goal here is to deliver on what you wanted. After you were caught red-handed trying to take it all away. Oh, man. So what about the goals that drove us when we started this process? Well, your goal was to try to put out a giant inferno that you had started of your own volition. But anyway, we wanted to protect the D&D play experience into the future. Nothing of the 1.2 was going to do anything more for that than the 1.0, except you were going to implement these broad, ambiguous rules that said, if you create content that is quote unquote offensive, harmful, whatever the heck that means, you're going to basically going to pull that person's license or seek legal action or demonetize, God knows what. Who knows what? And they kept that so vague. It's just like anything on Twitter or otherwise. We're going to stop hate speech. Who decides what's hate speech? Well, this wise person that we're just going to, trust with that arbitration of ideas. That's all. Yeah. So if somebody had made a D&D campaign where orcs are an evil race, right? Well, that's offensive. That's racist. We wanted to protect the D&D play experience into the future. You never couldn't do that. You guys have control over the mainline D&D products. Any third-party stuff, anybody looking at it who knows anything is going to understand it's third-party. And besides which, because it was third-party and they have to show they're not actually representing your company or anything else, you are both legally, PR-wise, and morally indemnified from anything somebody might produce that is quote-unquote harmful or offensive or whatever. You were never in any danger. I don't understand anything about what they were doing except it was a complete cash grab and trying to profit off of other people's work in one way, shape, or form. We still want to do that with your help. Do you? Now you do. We are grateful that this community is passionate and active because we'll need your help protecting the game's inclusive and welcoming nature. When was that threatened? By all means, give me an example where the openness and inclusive nature of tabletop role-playing games, D&D or otherwise, the D&D, the most well-known and most synonymous with tabletop role-playing games game on the planet. Tell me when that game's inclusive and welcoming nature was under threat. Show me where that was the case. And not because some social justice nincompoop flew in and decided to be a franchise tourist and say, orcs are awfully offensive as an evil race. That seems to imply something about the real world estimations of real people. No. Give me a break. Give me a break. You guys, okay, never mind. I could repeat myself, but I'd just be doing so. We wanted to limit the OGL to tabletop RPGs. Really? Then why was there virtual tabletop policies in the draft? I'll extend the connotation of draft to this point, because why not? With this new approach, we are setting that aside and counting on your choices to define the future of play. Oh, you mean you're putting the power in the hands of the fans like it already was before you decided to muck with it? Oh, okay. Here's a PDF of SRD 5.1 with the Creative Commons license. By simply publishing it, we place it under an irrevocable Creative Commons license. We'll get it hosted in a more convenient place next week. It was important that we take this step now, so there's no question. We'll be closing the OGL 1.2 survey now. We'll keep talking with you about how we can better support our players and creators. Yeah. Now, thanks as always for continuing to share your thoughts. Kyle Brink, executive producer, Dungeons and Dragons. Well, now I'm not a lawyer, and I'm certainly not an expert on copyright law and Creative Commons and so on. But as a layman, and absorbing what I have over the last couple of weeks or so, or a month basically, of looking at all this D&D stuff, this is a positive outcome, certainly. But does it actually address the problems that D&D did to themselves, their trustworthiness, their image amongst players and gamers? No. No, I think a lot of damage has been done. I think simply out of justifiable spite, a lot of people are going to be turning away from D&D proper. A lot of people are moving over to Pathfinder, or they're looking at other games like Warhammer, or any other dozen other role-playing games out there. In fact, this has really been a boon for independent gaming companies or smaller gaming companies with games and systems and everything that fall outside the mainline D&D products, but which are still in line with the same kind of genre or theme: high fantasy, adventure, and so on. Will D&D recover? Not to the point they were before all this started, but it's really going to be up to them to both, talk the talk as well as walk the walk. And the most important thing, and I think any D&D aficionado would agree with this, regardless of whatever all this saga and this controversy is, they have to start releasing quality product. Ever since 4th edition, most people would say that 3.5 was probably the pinnacle of D&D product within this last generation or so. But ever since 4th edition and 5th edition and so on, their products haven't been that great. They haven't been well received by the fan base or the customers. And so their only saving path at this point, the only way they can have a saving role on this, is if with 6th edition or 5.5 or whatever they do, they release products that are harken back to the quality of the olden days. But I don't know that that's possible, because it seems like the ideology of diversity, equity, inclusion, safe spaces, worrying about other people's feelings and so on, I think that's taken far too much root in the company's philosophy at this point, that anything they produce is just going to be maybe a smidge different than what they last produced, and what they last produced really wasn't that popular. So that's my initial thoughts. I still think at some point when the other publishers release their open gaming license system and everything, I might take a look at that and start trying to build a moon-based RPG just for the fun of it. A Crater Valley, Dog Cat Fox moon-based RPG. Would you like to play that? To play test it with me on the air? That'd be funny. Either way, sorry, I'm going to go over to the chat real quick and see what people have to say. Somnamnul Nation, what if you create a race that, due to a completely isolated, homogenous society, are truly xenophobic and therefore racist? Is this allowed? Can you imagine basing a fictional set of characters in a game on something that is either reflective of real history or real human nature and behavior, and just calling it something completely random? And then if somebody comes along and tells you what it's supposed to be a reflection of in real life, you can say, wow, you failed that Rorschach test. Can you imagine that? Emperor WR Costin IQ Scribe Live streaming on a Friday. Okay. Is that like online YouTube streaming Clue? Like, I accuse Scribelight of streaming on a Friday with his microphone. And then I take out the little confidential folder thing and I take out the 3 cards. And anyway, I'm an old board game. What do I know? Let's see. Texas Attorney General Secret Agent. Warhammer isn't much better. They have been hit by the woke bug. Have they? Admittedly, I'll make a confession. I am, and I'm not doing anything about it so far, but I'm looking at Warhammer 40K stuff again. It's been a long time. About a couple of the tabletop RPG books, not the miniatures stuff. I'm not much of an artist and everything else, but they do have a actual classic role-playing line called, what's it called? Wrath and Glory. And I'm looking at that. I don't know what I'm going to do with it, if anything, but I just got the bug. I haven't seen anything particularly woke about it yet. They have very specific rules in that say, yeah, girls can't be ultramarines, which is still true, which seems anti-woke by most standards, but I don't know. I mean, I don't have enough of a perspective to say how much they've changed one way or the other. Marking bad. Also, almost all Underdark races consider absolutely all other races to be inferior and the equivalent of animals or hardly even sentient. Yeah, can you imagine there being an antipathy between different races and different peoples and different ways of thinking in a fictional world? Can you imagine that as a reflection of just how things naturally work amongst peoples and cultures? Yeah, like that's just life. It's not glorifying it. It's just acknowledging that it exists and putting into conflict elements of the setting that you're in. Right? I mean, it's almost, the extension of a belief that role-playing games are reflective of real-life beliefs or actions or anything else is effectively no different than the satanic panic of the 80s, where anybody playing a role-playing game that involved in the fiction, in the setting, demons or evil forces or something else were then at the same time actually practicing witchcraft or Satanism. No. It's fictional. It's pretend. You can pretend to be a villain in a game and not actually be a villain in real life. The people that push this stuff, same mentality of back then. Now, thank you, Keldrig. It's amazing what a cult of ideology can do to an enjoyable entertainment space. Yeah, imagine that. Taking something that is effectively harmless, there's nobody any harm in the real world, is just, let's pretend. And then, of their own volition, imbuing it with some kind of moral test based on what you enjoy. Something that's fictional, doesn't harm anybody. Yeah. Now, thank you, Shady Grin. Thank you for the comment, at least. For me, I'm not coming back. I will still play because I have all the books I need, but their quality was going downhill for ages, and this fiasco was the last straw for me. Yeah, as long as you can still get copies, PDF or otherwise, of their older books, you don't need anything else. Effectively, you can make your own campaigns. Most people do. You can make your own character classes. Most people do. You can extrapolate from the existing rules to do your own thing. Most people do. Yeah. If you've got the core rule book from 3.5, or heck, the first Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, as archaic as that is, you can do whatever you want. It's your game. If you have the basics down, if you just need the book for the lore, and you can run a game with a completely different system, it doesn't matter. They can't stop you. It's only when you try to publish or monetize, it's a completely different thing. But for the casual player or the gamer group, they can't police your use of old material. Marking bad again. Both Drow and Durger have factions that absolutely despise all other members of any subrace of their race. Yeah. Writing in a sense of cultural or special supremacy into a fictional species or culture, or even different factions within the same species or culture, different nations, different philosophies, different religions. I mean, but you're glorifying hatred and conflict, like in a fictional space, sure, because I'm not hurting anybody. It's all make-believe. Let's see. And text in general. Okay, I was referencing to 40K minis. They haven't gone off the deep end like WotC. Yeah, like I say, my 40K exposure is relatively cursory at this point. I'm actually, I was into it briefly several years ago, and I kind of let it went by the wayside. And now with the D&D hubbub and some other things, I'm just sort of looking for something new to get really interested in. I kind of gravitated back to 40K, and so I'm taking a look at, and besides which, they didn't have rule books for doing regular old tabletop RPG character creation, etc. until just a few, I mean, now it's a few years ago, but until relatively recently. And so I'm looking at that and thinking, if I were to try to run a game online, could I do this? I've thought about that for years between Vampire the Masquerade and Elsewise, and so I'm still thinking about it. I just get kind of antsy about trying to run a game with different people from different time zones and trying to keep it all arranged. And would I stream it live? And do I have the ability? And can I use like Roll20 to make it work? I don't. It's all so complicated. It's all so complicated. But I'm thinking about it. Anna Lynn, Cyberpunk Red, and OFL VTM. OFL? I mean old, or maybe OFL means something else. But yeah, Vampire the Masquerade stopped. As far as I'm concerned, all you need at worst, I should say, is either a copy of 3rd edition, or if you can find one, I don't know if they still make them or not, but the 20th anniversary edition of Vampire the Masquerade, where it better generalizes a lot of the systems for ongoing play. A lot of the stuff in 3rd edition was sort of set at that time. So, like, if you had 2 points in resources, the amount of money you'd be getting per month as of like 1995 or 1993, whenever that book came out, it probably didn't reflect. Or actually, no, it was 3rd in 98, something like that. Anyway, yeah. So, but V20 revised a lot of things system-wise that are good. So I'd recommend using V20 for the system, but use 3rd Ed for the lore, because the classic 3rd edition Vampire the Masquerade lore is still the best as far as I'm concerned. There's a couple of supplements I'd recommend getting as well if you can. The Camarilla Guide, the Sabbat Guide, and the Ghoul's Fatal Addiction supplement. Now, while Ghoul's Fatal Addiction technically, well, not even technically, but is from 2nd edition, the lore within it, not necessarily the systems, but the lore therein, is still valuable and good for playing a game. Anyway, that's just me being a snob. I'm a total snob. Let's see, Dr. Functional. I wonder if Scribe is a good GM. I tried to be. I mean, not to brag too much, but back in college, I ran a 9-person Star Wars D20 campaign for like 2 months straight, and everybody was chomping at the bit for the next session. 9 players. I'm not even kidding. 9 players. And this was in the lead up to the release of, I think, Attack of the Clones and thereafter and everything. And I mean, everybody had a blast as far as I could tell. Maybe beggars can't be choosers or something, and I just got a swelled head over people being excited to have somebody run a game for them in Star Wars. But I felt pretty good at that. I've run several games in different ways, either tabletop or live action over the years. And without, giving myself too much credit, I got generally, I'll just say conservatively, generally positive feedback. So, possibly. My only hang up is having a good enough handle of whatever lore I'm working with to make it, legitimate. And also the timing and arrangement of getting a group together and sort of making sure that the group works well. So, yeah. Let's see. Texas Attorney General again. Have you seen the guy who's been running the same D&D campaign for like 30 or 40 years now? Maybe. I mean, I've heard of such things, certainly. The most entertaining one I saw, and this is several years ago now, might still be doing it for all I know. There was a couple of guys who brought in their dad to play Dungeons and Dragons who had no experience in Dungeons and Dragons whatsoever. And they did like a podcast or something of just the experience of having dad who had absolutely no concept of any of this stuff, and just the comedy that resulted in that. I forget what that was called. I'm sure somebody in the chat knows. Let's see, Dr. Functional. I had a feeling as you seem inclined to be. Me, not so much. I can do it effectively, just rather play than GM. I love brainstorming. I love helping people come up with a character that'll fit the setting, or just sort of, working between players to try to figure out relationships between characters and get everything set up. I think I probably have more fun setting up the prelude to a campaign and getting people really invested in their characters before we even start the story proper. Because I think there's, and I don't think I'm alone in this thought. I think there's a lot more fun to be had if you've put at least some thought into where your character is coming from, so that you have a more sort of organic reflex in how to play that character as the game actually begins. So doing preludes, backstories, that kind of stuff. I always enjoy doing that and working with players at a round table to sort of like feed off of each other and figure out how everybody knows each other, or what threads to their backgrounds might intertwine as the story goes on. That kind of stuff I always love. Systems, I am weak at systems. I'm an English major, not a math major, right? So like if I start using a system on the regular, I'll get it down after practice, over sessions. But I'm much stronger when it comes to storytelling and character development and things like that. Let's see. Annalyn still debating about releasing a setting. Well, just release it. Call it version 1.0 and refine it as you go. You got one, you're going to have to release it eventually, right? Release it, get some feedback, revise. There is a quote I always attribute it to Francois Truffaut, but I'm sure it came from elsewhere as well. A masterpiece is never completed, only abandoned. So if you've got something that you want to test out or try out or whatever, just put it out there, get some feedback, think about it, use it, refine it. That's all you can do. Thank you, Snubbirth. Late, but it seems Marvel and Hasbro are doing layoffs soon. Seems all these companies are overdrive on their unpopular phase. Setting aside the fact that everybody has been affected by the economy, by inflation, by everything else as a result of both the aftermath of the pandemic and the energy knock-on crisis from what's going on in Russia and Ukraine and so on. A lot of companies did a lot of growing over the last couple of years that they just can't sustain anymore, and so they're having to cut big tech and otherwise. And it's I don't know. I'm not an economist. I'm not an expert in all the business stuff, but it is a remarkable time we're living in. Not necessarily a positive one, but remarkable all the same. A couple more comments and I'm going to wrap up. Corey Suzuki, Scribe, have you watched the movie Bullet Train? It's one of the newer movies to me that felt legitimately like a D&D one-shot. I have not seen it yet. I've seen clips. I've heard varying things from varying people. But I sometimes I'll watch a movie and part of me cannot help but think, did this originate as a tabletop role-playing session? We get like a band of people together and they go off on a heist or something. I just think to myself, if I just change the setting a little bit and the costumes, did somebody come up with this movie script because they played a tabletop game and just decided to extend it out into a script? I really wonder, and I'm sure it's happened, I wonder how many times that has actually been the case. Somebody like transcribed the events of some tabletop RPG they were playing and then turned it into a screenplay, because you have all these minds sort of effectively writing characters for themselves. And also, how many times that's happened, but the people who were involved in the originating game have no idea that they were effectively helping to write somebody else's screenplay? Who knows? And let's see. Marking bad again. Marvel and Hasbro are downsizing the DEI staff that don't contribute to the bottom line and are essentially parasites on the payroll. Well, that's happening across industries and across the board. You saw that in a stream I did where you had that roundtable of DEI executives and advocates and so on, and consultants who were all scared about how companies were just cutting the budgets of DEI because they didn't see it as important. And there's a reason they don't see it as important. There's no straight line between having one and increasing your bottom line. Having a DEI program now is effectively just a checkbox to tell other companies who have made it their policy to only work with or give preferential treatment to companies that do have a DEI program. That's the only reason to keep one. And just a skeleton crew of a DEI program, or to say that you have one, or to have like an ERG system set up. Like, oh yeah, we have a DEI program. Okay, checkbox. Now Goldman Sachs will work with you, right? Or now Mass Mutual will work with you because we appreciate DEI. We want to work with companies who are as dedicated to diversity, equity, inclusion as we are. It doesn't mean anything anymore. And employing a whole bunch of people, or giving somebody some giant salary to be the DEI executive, or funding ERGs and all this other stuff, ultimately, it's all for show. And when it comes down to brass tacks, does it actually contribute to the bottom line? Yes or no? 9 times out of 10, the answer is no. And so just the pragmatism of the numbers. Yeah, DEI is going to get shortchanged real quick. And honestly, I think deservedly so. But I'm more interested, on a completely different tangent, more interested to see what happens after the Supreme Court rules on affirmative action. If they outlaw affirmative action, if they effectively say that it's unconstitutional, which I think it is, it'll be interesting to see what happens with all DEI stuff across the board. But anyway, that's all neither here nor there. There you go, guys. There's the D&D update. If anything else happens in the near future or elsewise that is relevant to this, I will do probably another stream on this. Thanks again to Shady Grin for giving me the heads up on that. Everybody, thank you for joining me for this little article read and sort of stream of consciousness on gaming and elsewise. Moderators, thanks for keeping an eye on things. Even though everyone here is so well behaved, you have very little to do. Everybody who donated, thank you so much for your generosity. It always bowls me over, and I'm humbled by it, and I hope I have earned your patronage in that regard. If you'd like to hear more from me, you can find me here Sunday at 8 a.m. Pacific, 11 a.m. Eastern for the Sunday stream, where I'll talk about a thing. Not quite sure yet. Probably decide tomorrow. And as always, you can find me here at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern on Thursdays for TED Excellence. And starting next week, it is Superpowers Month, where every edition of TED Excellence in February will be My Superpower is Blank, because there are a plethora of TEDx Talks and TED Talks with a title similar to that across the ages, and I'm going to pick out a few and see what they have to say about what their superpower is. So we'll learn about that together. Either way, everybody, I hope you have a good rest of your Friday. I hope you have a good and fun weekend ahead of you. I hope you're all safe and well. If you are not well, please get well soon, and I'll see you on the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.